Yo, 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 what is happening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages? It is your hostess with the mostest. It is PKR, Pastor Keenan Riley, and we are here live and in full effect on People Suck, Love Them Anyways. And as always, I am joined by my sidekick, Nicky Nick. As if you couldn't tell, he's tapping on the mic. He's actually moving the mic, but it sounded like he was tapping on the mic. So, yeah, man, what's going on? How you living? It's Wednesday. It's another week. The world's falling apart. It's burning to the ground.
Time for World War III.
Time, yeah, right.
Go,
Are you geared up? You got your milk and bread and eggs. Are you ready to go?
Not yet. Not yet. I'll wait a little bit longer. It's like everybody else, last minute when we look up at 10 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night and we see the sun, and then we're like, hey, I should take cover.
Are we in Alaska or where are we? Right
I
now?
should take cover.
Yeah. So, well, by then though, the radiation will kind of like scorch through the milk, right?
You would think so. Depends on where it lands, I guess. But
yeah,
I heard I just saw on Facebook earlier. Apparently, like Fort Knox is on a soft lockdown or something like that.
Really?
Yeah, for the foreseeable future.
Over what's going
some
the conflict
sort.
right now?
They said there's no credible threat, but of course, it's the government. So
why would you have a soft lockdown if there's no credible threat?
I don't know.
It makes no sense.
I don't like it, but who knows?
It makes no sense, man. It makes no sense to me. It's kind of funny, like just playing off that a little bit. Like I was scrolling through Facebook today, and I saw a reporter asking Trump. I don't know where he was at, front lawn of the White House or somewhere, and they're like, "What's your plans on striking Iran? Will you or won't you?" And he's like, "That's a stupid question." He's like, "Do you want me to just say yes and tell you what time so everybody can watch?" And I'm like, that's so savage, like that is so savage to say because it is funny. It's like, let me just go ahead and tell you all my plans. Let me air it out on national TV. Right. So therefore, acting like nobody in Iran has TV or something,
Or knows English.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's funny, man, to think about things like that. But yeah, the world is kind of falling apart right now.
Can you imagine having that job? I know this is a weird side note, but like working for the Iranian government, your only job is to watch American news to know what Trump is going to do next.
Right. Well, they're probably over here going, okay, so men in women's sports. Okay, like let's get to the good stuff. Like, are we getting blown off the map or what's happening right now?
The only relevant women's basketball player got knocked down last night. This is crazy.
Gosh, yes, and she did. She did, man.
Okay.
Yeah, she did. She got knocked to the ground, and it caused a little tussle. Little tussle.
Somebody said the WNBA turned into WWE last night. I was
man. Whoever walked up on her and gave her like the bump, to knock her down, like, if you can't see and you run into somebody, but I don't know how much force there was because like I didn't see the whole video, but like whenever she walked in there, like you just didn't see you didn't see Caitlyn anymore. Like she just went down, like right on the ground,
flopped around like LeBron and Patrick Mahomes.
Oh man, like a fish out of water.
Yeah. Make it more dramatic than it needs to be.
Yeah. I didn't see the whole. Like I said, I didn't finish the whole clip, man. But I didn't know if things kind of got a little rowdy or what happened afterwards. So
a little bit.
Man, and see, the world's falling apart, man. We got the WNBA fighting.
I know, right? People finally watching, and now they're really watching. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, man, and I know nobody probably watches NASCAR anymore at all. But we got a little driver rivalry happening over there. They actually raced in Mexico City last weekend, and it's been this driver rivalry happening for the last couple of weeks, man. And guy got spun out again. After the race, he just went up and got in this dude's car. Nice. Yeah, like from his waist up, you couldn't see him. He was in the car with the dude. And there was some hands and some words and so man, it's just tensious times right now, So
like what happened back in the day where you just ran the car into a wall? Now we're gonna jump in the car with the person.
Yeah, man, I don't know.
Take it out on the track, at least. At least that's what people go for.
Exactly, man. So I don't know what's happening, but maybe the spirit of the devil is in the world right now, man.
Behind us, Satan.
Yeah, so he's just causing all kinds of division and chaos and craziness, man.
I blame the Christian nationalists.
Is that what it is? They put Trump in office, and then it all went downhill from there, type situation. So I don't know. Man.
Some would argue it's all going uphill. I don't know. Depends on what side of the spectrum you're on.
Well, that's true. Yeah, I agree with that, man. But Yeah, so I asked you what you wanted to talk about today, and you said, X-nay, the motivation and the
Doom and gloom,
inspiration.
baby.
Yeah, we're going doom and gloom. We're talking about. He said he wanted to talk about Israel and the war. He wanted to talk
War,
about immigration going on in the U.S. And
killing it.
I'm like, scorched earth.
Nice, yeah.
Matches what's going on in the world right now. So
We got fire on one side and ice on the other.
yeah, true.
We got
That
this going
is
crazy.
yeah, that is a true statement.
Um,
But yeah, what's
But
going?
hey, also shout out Delaware and
Oh yeah,
Vermont.
Delaware and Vermont, man,
Yeah,
for adding the
Delaware and Vermont.
podcast. Yeah,
Yeah, we're
absolutely.
blowing up New England in a safe way.
Yeah, right.
Best thing to happen since Tom Brady.
Oh
But,
man,
we're
that's
killing
true
it.
too.
Killing
Probably
it.
that is true. Yeah, but yeah, thank you guys so much for hitting that download button up north for sure. Yeah, like I said, we just continue, man, and grow a little bit at a time. That's what it's all about, and just staying consistent with it. But yeah, I mean, let's go scorched earth, man. After we've added a couple of states, let's just talk
Yeah,
about some off the rails
let's
type
push 'em
stuff,
out.
and yeah,
Push 'em out.
see what happens. But we were talking about Israel. We were talking about what's going on, the tensions in the Middle East and stuff like that. And there's a lot of controversy. Of course, you're going to have some biblical people, some Christians that are going to be like, hey, no matter what happens, we stand with Israel. And it's like, and then they cite the Bible where it's like, hey, it's like we any nation that honors Israel, that blesses Israel, will be blessed. So on and so forth. And then kind of like what you were talking about, the other side of that is like, well, is that taken out of context in the fact of what is God actually saying with those verses? Is God talking about modern day Israel? Was he talking about back then before Jesus came? And the Bible says that when Jesus came, that it was no longer just Jews, it was Jews and Gentiles at that point. Like he was grafting the earth, the world together. He was giving everybody a chance at Christianity, everybody a chance at heaven one day.
And being God's quote unquote chosen people.
Right, exactly. And so, so you have kind of like two different sides of the battle going on. And and what exactly it means, and I can see, it's kind of like what you were saying beforehand. It's really about how deep you want to dive into the situation and how your convictions are about the situation. So you can tell your side if you want to, and I'll tell you mine, and we'll go from there, and then we may be throwing hands.
Let's go.
It is the spirit of the Antichrist in here tonight. But yeah, I mean, you were talking about how kind of like you were not really siding with, but how you could kind of see the point of it's like, well, is God talking about his modern day church? Is he talking about modern day Israel? Is he talking about the government rule of Israel, or you could kind of see that side of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think if again, I think there's arguments. Anybody's going to weaponize certain verses, to support their side, against the other side, and
we've been seeing that since day one.
Exactly, day one.
Yeah.
It is interesting. We've had a conversation on the podcast, I think, before. I mean, we were talking a little bit before the recording. We talk about how it is interesting. I'll leave it at that for now. It's interesting to think about because we, as Christians, we believe that we are the chosen people of God. We have accepted Jesus. The only way into heaven, the only way to the Father is through Jesus, right?
That's what the Bible says.
That's what the Bible says. That's what we believe as Christians, right? But we have the Israelites who are historically and currently, for the most part, I believe, Jewish, which means they still, like back in the Bible days, they still
I'm going to Google
believe,
that. I'm going to Google it while you talk.
They don't believe that Jesus is the Son of God, the Messiah. They believe that they're still waiting on someone to come. Just like the Pharisees. This is why the Pharisees. This is why everybody threw a fit against the disciples and everybody in the beginning of the New Testament. Through the Gospels, through Acts, and all that. This is why they threw such a fit, because they didn't believe that Jesus was the Son of God. They didn't believe these things. And so, I guess the idea out there comes down to, okay, are the Israelites still the chosen people of God if they do not, if they do not believe in Jesus? It's kind of like this split that people believe in, that, once Jesus came on the scene, once Christianity, entered the picture, that is where the split occurred, that, Jews were no longer going to be considered the chosen people of God, because now the Jews and the Gentiles becoming Christians became the chosen people of God.
Right.
So Israel continues through Christians, not so much as a political state nation type
Right.
situation.
Let me read. It says Israel is a diverse nation with a majority Jewish population, but also significant Muslim, Christian, and Druze communities. That's Druze. So I may be
I think
mispronouncing
it's
that.
Druze. I don't know. That
Druze.
might not be right
Okay.
either. Who knows?
Within Judaism, there are varying degrees of religious observance, from secular to ultra orthodox. Similarly, Islam in Israel is predominantly Sunni or Sunni.
Sunni.
Sunni, okay, but also includes other sects like, and then it says this word that I cannot pronounce. Christianity in Israel encompasses various denominations, including Eastern Orthodox, Catholic, and Protestant. And the Druze, while having historical ties to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, maintain their distinct religious identity and practices. So, right there, you have the Jewish population. You also have Muslim. You also have Christian. You also have this Druze. So I mean, you have like four different makeups or sects of people who believe differently about things. And so it's like, I don't know. It doesn't break down in percentages. Wow. Oh, wait a minute. It might actually. I'm going to get.
Hold on. We
hang
found the
on.
pie
Just
chart,
yeah. Hang on.
ladies and
Yeah.
gentlemen.
Exactly.
Maybe.
Death by pie chart, man. It takes you back to like some old school. Some like projector style stuff on the
Right.
board way back in the day. So here it is. So Israel is made up of 81% of Jewish belief. So 81%, yeah, 81%. Non-Jewish is 19%, and that really, again,
Breaks
that
up a lot.
reflects, really, according to this pie chart now, and this is PewResearch.org, but according to this pie chart, only 2% of Israel is actually Christian.
So only 2%, right?
Yeah.
So only 2% of the entire nation that we believe is God's chosen people are actually God's chosen.
Actually believe, believe and abide with Christianity.
Yeah, and so that's kind of where I've heard this argument, and I do believe there is a little bit of interesting details, thoughts, ideas that come along with that argument. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm sold on any way or the other because, and this is my kind of devil's advocate side here. This whole thing has been, kind of very, of course, controversial. Because you have the Israeli government, and we have a lot of Christians and Americans or whoever you may, whatever side you're on, supporting, Israel bombing and shooting rockets and war and murder and death and hospitals exploding and all this stuff, going on over there in that area that Israel is putting out upon. The Iranians, Palestinians, however you want to call them. I don't know if there's a difference or not. I'm not educated enough to know that.
Right.
But regardless, the Israelis, Israel's government, army, military is killing people.
Benjamin Netanyahu or something like
Benjamin
that.
Netanyahu. They're killing people, and so that is where there's a lot of controversy because even not to pull into the immigration issue, but there is a lot of controversy because a lot of people seem to have differing opinions as to what who God is, right? Who Jesus is, who God is, what we're supposed to do. Are we supposed to embrace immigrants? Are we supposed to obey and respect law and order? Are we supposed to honor Israel as God's chosen people? And all these sorts of different types of things that I think we have a lot of differing opinions on, obviously in the Christian spectrum of things.
Right.
As to what's right, what's morally right, and what's morally wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about Christians, our morals are based in the Bible. They're based in what the Bible teaches, what God teaches, what Jesus teaches. All of those sorts of things is where our morality is supposed to come from.
Right.
But we have people, we talk about all the time, taking these out of context Bible verses and just throwing them at these situations and all of these sorts of things. And so there is a lot of confusion out there, and it's not that I wanted to be fiery in the podcast as much as I just kind of wanted to, shoot some ideas back and forth, help people understand maybe what the Bible is trying to say, maybe what we as Christians, what our stance not necessarily should be, but, maybe try to help people understand the situation from a Christian perspective a little bit better.
Yeah, well, and that's, I think, honestly, too, I'm pulling up my chair for this one. It's going to get real.
Yeah,
it's going to get real. I think it's like open to our own interpretation, honestly. Because like you can go and listen to 18 different preachers preach scripture 18 different ways. And to me, it's like, I was talking to Nick earlier, and I was like, well, I kind of look at it from not like standing beside Israel, but I feel like as the U.S. has been seen as this leader of the free nation, of the free world, it's like anytime there's conflict, it's kind of been like we're the big brother that steps in, and says, hey, look, like y'all need to calm down. Y'all need to straighten things out. It's like you go in this corner and you go in this corner and take a time out, and we'll all be okay. So, I told him, I said,
I mean, I
I
don't know if I'd say the big brother. I mean, oftentimes we're the ones shooting missiles back at other people.
well,
too.
yeah, that's true too.
Like,
We're
you
always
suck.
getting involved.
We're supporting this person.
Yeah, we're always getting involved somehow or another. But again, that is a man-made system in a lot of ways, and it's like, and we understand and we know that the system is flawed and broken, or maybe you don't think it is, but I think it is for the large part. I think it's flawed and broken. I think that human people, fleshly people, put together some stuff that they thought was going to do pretty well, and it's like there's a lot of stuff that needs to go back and be looked at, and whenever, my goodness gracious, it's like as human beings, we have this really huge problem of trying to overcomplicate things a lot, and I know our Constitution has got like so many different. Subdivisions and divisions and yeah, and like it's different streets and one-way streets and no U-turns and whatever, but it's like whenever you want to know a rule, Nick, or a law, it's like, well, it's in subject A of I don't know, group C,
section 1A,
yeah,
subset
like
B.
yeah, and it's like, and you got to go like chase seven different avenues to go find a law, and it's like, I didn't even know that was a law,
or we rely on a Supreme Court to interpret that law and give us their supposedly unbiased opinion of what that law is.
It's 9 judges, correct? It's 9 judges.
Always got to be uneven.
It's got to be uneven, but it's like, and again, but it's still, and those people are appointed and then by the president and then voted into and things like that, and it's like, so if that's the case, man, it's like you can really again, it's all political, and so whenever you bring politics, it's it's sad to say that politics are not Christianity as much as what people want them to be.
Or a theocracy.
Yeah. People, and I mean, again, like we could talk. Golly, we could talk so much about that, but people, again, we saw it with this election. We saw it in 2016. We saw it in 2020. Like we always, it's like, I love the people that are like, Jesus is my king and Trump is my president, and it's like, and I'm like, what are you solving? Like right now, like you could have left the Trump is my president off. You know what I'm saying? Like, but if Jesus is your king, it should say it doesn't matter who is president because Jesus is my king, type situation. But it's like we think, and no slight to Trump or anybody else, Biden, Trump, Obama, whoever, like, let's be honest. Being the leader of the free world is a difficult task, and we as people get the opportunity to basically sit back and critique a decision that we have no clue how much weight it holds on countries, on other people we will never meet, and we would. And we're so free to just sit back in a seat and go, well, if I was in office, this is. Well, all right, Bubba, why didn't you run? Because if you go back and you look at the qualifications to be president, like you have to be a United States citizen. You have to be, I think it's 37 or older.
45, I can't remember.
No, it's 30. No, it's young, bro. It's like
we
30.
Never had somebody that young.
Yeah, if you go and Google like what it's like 3 qualifications. I mean that's really it. And so it's like anybody can run if they want to. I mean that's why
you gotta have a platform.
Yeah, that's why you see Trump in office. That's why you see people now like like celebrities
became governor.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's like you're seeing celebrities now thinking about a run for the president. And but people don't understand, I feel like, the weight of it. But I know I've kind of gotten way off course. But to me, like the war that's going on over in the Middle East right now, I said, we are viewed as that person who try to navigate peace, where we try to navigate peace. And a lot of times it's like, how do you do that? Trump's is peace through strength. Like I'm going to go flex my muscles. Biden was more like we're going to kind of peacefully move around and station people and threaten, and see what happens type deal. And so everybody has their different way of leading things. But as I was telling Nick, I think it's not really as much about the U.S. protecting and standing with Israel as much as what it is. I feel like that we are a key player, and I don't want to sound like braggadocious, but I think we are a key player in what God wants to do in the second coming of Christ. I feel like that if we don't get involved and we kind of sit back with our feet cocked up, it doesn't bring the right players into the playing field. And like so it's like we have to get involved, whether we are whatever side of the playing field. It doesn't really matter, but it's like we have to be involved to bring the right players in. It's kind of like we're like the bait. You know what I'm saying? Like we're like the bait to get everybody else involved.
The catalyst,
the
reaction that starts a fire.
Pretty much, yeah, type situation. We're the train wreck, and everybody else is going to show up to watch.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, it is crazy. I mean, of course, we have international listeners, and some of the stuff Keenan said, you probably have no idea what we're talking about. But
with what?
Like just the political side of things, like how things get voted in and all this.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you might,
Supreme Court and all that. But,
yeah.
It is just, I think, as we're trying to approach, as a Christian looking into this situation, it does get dicey. I don't think any way you slice it, it's not going to be dicey. And so.
Well, I was going to say, even if you slice it, it has to be dicey. It is diced if you
slice
it. Yeah.
Anyway,
but it's a bad dad joke.
It is. But it is going to be, I think, difficult because it is tough to be a Christian and stand with Israel when what Israel is doing is causing the death of innocent people. Right. I mean, what Israel is doing is causing death and destruction and chaos and all kinds of stuff, right?
But do you think that a country has the? Do you think that the country has the? How was I going to say that? Has the right, I guess, to defend itself. So if Iran attacked Israel, does Israel have the right to defend itself?
Right, and I mean, I think it's one of those things too, where it's so. This is where you get really overtly political because you have things going on in the background, things going on behind the scenes. You've got messages being sent, you've got meetings being had, you've got tension rising through what, like, kind of, you think of America, we had the Cold War back in like the 60s and such, where there wasn't any actual physical conflict. It was all this spy and espionage and messages and all these types of things that were going on.
I was going to say, are you talking about war or just church on Sunday?
Both.
That's a common church Sunday here in America.
It's all relative. But and again, you see a lot of this stuff going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Which I guess it's interesting because, like, again, you have. I'm going to take it all the way back to the Old Testament, right? And this is where I guess I'm trying to lean into your side here, or your thought and argument here is, you go all the way back to the Old Testament, right? And you think about, which I say, and I will say it this way as well: there are no innocent people. We're all guilty of sin.
Well, we're born into sin.
Yeah, we're born into sin. We're all guilty of sin. What I'm trying to say is, as Christians, are we doing our part? And the answer to this is going to be no. But as Christians, are we doing our part in spreading the gospel to the people who don't have it?
Mm-hmm.
Offering those people a way to receive salvation, instead of inciting conflict. Are we doing more work to?
I'll answer that. No.
Exactly. I said the answer was going to be no.
Yeah,
I said the answer was going to be no. Like I said, I saw a video on Facebook, and I told you and Julie about it before we started recording. And this video was talking about what I mentioned earlier in the episode. And one of in my head, as I was thinking, whether it's spirit or just how I felt like it at the moment. But I said it's crazy that we have Christians celebrating the destruction of a nation that we would never step foot in to pray for people and spread the gospel in.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And I was like, we are all about, let's defend Israel, let's fight for Israel, let's stand for Israel against Iran, against the Palestinians, against all these different people.
Mm-hmm.
But we as Christians, our job is not to, again, we don't fight a battle with earthly weapons. We fight against evil spirits and principalities. As Christians, we are not, period, we are not doing our job.
Mm-hmm.
If we were doing our job, in all honesty, the people of Israel would not be 82% Jewish, right?
Right. Yeah.
If we were doing our job, the people, I don't know what the Iran breakdown is, but the people in Iran would not
Would
be
you like for me to
primarily.
look?
Sure, go ahead. I'm going to assume Islamic. I'm going to assume Islamic, but
Yeah.
I might be wrong about that. They would not be Islamic. Right now, I say that's a very bold statement to say because God is putting these things into motion, like you were saying. If God is orchestrating all of this to lead to this, the big, craziness that happens in Revelation, before the rapture and after the rapture and all these things, because there are people much smarter than me, very in-depth, detailed theologians who dig into Revelations and they really find out, what all this symbolism means, or at least they have an idea of what all this symbolism means. It's about the beast from the east or whatever they call it, and all of these things that they pull from the Bible and say, oh, this player in the book of Revelation has to be Russia, or this player has to be Iran, this player has to be America. All those people who are pulling stuff from the book of Revelation and through prophecies and all these sorts of things throughout the Bible and saying this is how things have to play out in order to get us to that point. There are a lot of smarter people out there who are saying all that. And so at that point, nothing I do, nothing Christians can do, nothing the world, us can do to stop what God has set in motion.
Yeah.
We can't stop what God has set into motion, and God sets things into motion in weird ways. How many different times throughout the Old Testament do we see God killing women and children and innocents and all of these sorts of things from all of these different nations? God tells the Israelites to completely and irrevocably wipe out the Amalekites, the Canaanites, the Canaanites, and all of these types of people. God swallows up entire groups of Israelites into the earth, killing them, right?
Right.
For the sins of a few. And so we see this stuff happen a lot throughout the Bible. And so, there is biblical precedent for some of this stuff, as far as, God wouldn't want us to kill innocents. Well, God did kill innocents, because we're not innocent.
Right.
God in the Old Testament, there were many different times in which God allowed seemingly quote unquote morally, innocent people to die to further
Genesis 6.
Yeah, the definitely, the Nephilim. But again, just to allow the his plan and his purpose and his goal and his story to continue.
Yeah.
Everything that God was orchestrating, there was collateral damage.
Yeah.
People died, people lost their lives in order for God's chosen people to make it where they were supposed to make it, for Jesus to be born and for us to be right where we're at right now.
Yeah. According to the conversation, whatever that is. According to that, we're in a pie chart again.
Oh, here we go.
But here's the crazy part, man. Christianity in Iran is 1.5%. So literally, there's almost as many Christians in Iran as what there is Israel. And that's the crazy part. Like, we're over here like, blow them off the map. And it's like, wait, but there's as many Christians.
People are there too.
Right, there's as many Christians over there. Now, here's the crazy part. They said that most people identify as a Shiite Muslim over there, about 32%. But they said that with the new generations that are coming up, that they are not embracing Muslimhood anymore, that they're actually being more what we would call over here non-denominational type deal. Or like, it's like we're not even really embracing the ritualistic type, religion anymore. So
breaking free from their ancestors.
So that is a 22% deal over there. So that's pretty crazy to think about too. So that's almost taken over. So really, like to be a Muslim in Iran, you talk about 30% of the population, but you have 23% who don't even identify. So it's really starting to become a trend not to even identify and partake. So then it kind of begs the question of, if you let things go long enough, will that threat begin to die out? It's like so.
It's always the loudest voices that are the most prominent,
right? Of course, but then we go back to, like, if you think about that, like if it's a trend to start kind of pushing in that direction where they're not embracing it anymore, then do we practice that fruit of the Spirit called patience and love and say, hey, look, like, we see the trend moving in the right direction. We know that there's some crazy people. I mean, you meet crazy people everywhere, don't get me wrong. We're not firing rockets at each other from your house to mine, whenever we get in a fight or a tizzy. But yeah, it's like, so you're going to meet crazy people no matter where you go. It's like, so what are we truly trying to represent and trying to do with this whole situation? And, I've been a lot over in 1 Samuel right now with David, and kind of like, watching David's upbringing and things like that. And of course, I mean, one scripture that I harp on a lot is 1 Samuel 16:7, which is um, uh, whenever Samuel was trying to anoint the next king of Israel. And and he was watching David and his brothers. Well, David wasn't there, but he was watching David's brothers walk in, and the first guy that came in was Eliab, and he was like, "Oh, surely that's him,"
Big
and
boy.
yeah, he was muscular and good looking and all that good stuff. And God says, hey, look, it's not him. He's like, you look upon the outward appearance, but I judge upon the heart. And that's where I think, like, man, like, as much as what I read the Bible and as much as what I try to do right and try to be like Jesus and try to say the right thing and try to do the right thing and just try to be a good human being, and try to be secure in my relationship. I often go back to that verse and think about, God judges the heart. It's not about it's not about this outward appearance. It's not about these nice clothes. It's not about what you're posting on Facebook every day. It's not about things like that. It's not about this outward appearance. It's not about this outward body, even this shell. It is about what is transpiring within our hearts. And if we are, and I mean, it's the mentality of if you let a person talk long enough. That's why I listen a lot. If you let a person talk long enough, you're going to figure them out. You're going to figure out what they're about. You're going to figure out who they are. You're going to figure out their motives, their agenda, and everything else, because it's coming from their heart. And so it's like, if we would just slow down and just be like, hey, look, like, our hearts, man, are such a mirror into who we really are. If you would slow down and just listen to somebody and just kind of look, you can see the intentions of their heart. You can see who they are, what they're about, what's going on. And it's like, you can tell me all day who you think you are, but I can listen to you and watch you long enough to really figure out who you are. And as Christians, I think we have to be more mindful. There we go. More mindful of that situation, of that scenario, where it's like, where you're going back to the point of we're cheering, almost like whenever we blow somebody off the map, or we're cheering whenever it's like we think that somebody gets what we think they deserve, and we're cheering about it. And it's like, that is showing the divide. That is showing the bitterness. That is showing the however you want to call it. I mean, the roots of anger and just evil within the confines of your own heart. And then, but we stand up on a table, or we stand up on a stool, or we stand up on a stage, or we stand up on Facebook, or we stand up on social media, whatever platform, and we're like, we preach the gospel, or we post a Bible verse, or we do whatever, and it's like, I saved the world today, and it's like, but did you really?
Right.
Did you really? Because
like I find myself, you're checking your phone throughout the day, like, who's agreed with me? What are the comments going to say? What are the likes going to say? Am I right? Am I wrong?
Yeah.
If I'm wrong, I know I'm right anyway. So I'm going to tell you that I'm right anyway.
And that's the crazy part about it, man. About life, it's like people are so bought in to what they post, what they say, and whatever. It's like I don't know the last person that I heard say, "I'm sorry, I was wrong." I don't know. I don't know when I've heard that last. You know what I'm saying?
It's been a while.
I mean, really. I mean, it's just like, it's crazy to stop and think about, like, people, we use social media platforms and stuff for a lot of different things, but it's like, I don't know the last time I saw somebody get on a platform and be like, I'm sorry, man, I apologize. Like, it's not my direction to pull people further away from God.
It's crazy. Like, we used to have those, like, apology videos that celebrities were doing for a while. Do you remember that time period? Like, celebrities were making these apology videos for things they used to say or things they used to do or post.
I missed that, I guess.
Yeah, it was
when
pretty
was
wild
it?
little time period. Not too long ago. I mean, a few years.
You're
ago,
looking
maybe.
at your watch like 20 minutes ago,
or
did I miss it?
It was a while ago. I remember because John Chris made a joke about it. Like, he made a little skit about celebrity apology videos.
Yeah.
About how fake they were. It was like they were so scripted. Trying to apologize.
Yeah.
But I just going into that, I think we talked a lot about it around election time here in America. You have all these people, like you said, posting, Jesus is king, but Trump is my president. Or we talked a lot. Even I always refer back to the time I was up at our state's capitol, and you see the Christians there one day talking bad about the LGBTQI plus community that were there the day before, and then you have them talking bad about the others, and there was never this, there was always this just discord, this discontent, this anger, this I'm right, you're wrong.
What does the IA stand for?
Intersex, asexual, I think, something
Okay.
like that.
Right.
I might
Proceed.
be wrong on that, but
I just wondered.
yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
I may be completely wrong.
Yeah.
But again, we always are, we're so, as Christians, maybe I said this last week, I don't remember. I think I said it last week. I said we're so worried about being bold that we forget we're being bullies.
Oh yeah,
Right?
yeah.
You
did say that last week.
As Christians, we want to be bold, we want to be loud, we want to get people's attention, but we're doing it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
We spend so much time, saying certain things, doing certain things because we think that's being bold for Christ, when in reality, all we're doing is pushing people further away from Christ.
Yeah.
Because and this is, to me, I was thinking about it. It kind of hit me hard a second, but I was like, if our job as Christians is to, build the kingdom of God, spread the gospel, say, help God enter the lives of people and save their souls. If that's our job, I have to imagine what would a Palestinian say if they looked at a Christian on Facebook who was posting about, Iranians getting what they deserve, right? And innocent, I'm saying a Palestinian little, teenager, kid, adult, whatever, whoever, that's, on Facebook and sees, how Christians in America are responding to what's going on over there. Or think about, if we're going to get even closer to home here, think about, maybe somebody who is, Hispanic or from a different country that may be here illegally, and they see Christians on Facebook, get them out of our country, get them out of here, they don't deserve to be here, all this sort of stuff,
right,
that you see on Facebook every day. How would they feel about Jesus if that is the image we're presenting? And that's what I think about a lot the past few years, is past couple of years especially, is, what am I presenting? And I know I don't do a good job of that. I know that we've set that up on this podcast. That could be mean, demeaning, whatever you want to say. But, it's just one of those things that I have to remind myself of sometimes. Like, sometimes I don't post things. Sometimes I don't comment things because I remind myself, like, hey, this is not presenting a good image of Christ. If there are lost people on your feed, there are lost people that and if you say this, do this, share this, post this, it's going to push those people further away from God rather than bring them closer to God.
Yeah, I think that's the reason why it's so important to have a circle, have a group that you feel comfortable with sharing whatever it might be. Whatever it might be. I even I've been doing this thing on TikTok called Mirror Confessions, where I'm I want to kind of reveal some things, not like in my life or like in ministry or Christianity in general. It's like there's no perfect Christian. We said that, but it's like things that you might not think people struggle with, but they really do. And one thing I talked about yesterday was the fact of that I feel like that I live about 95% of my life behind a wall, and it's built for protection. It's built because I feel like that whenever I'm weak, that if I portray that I'm weak, that I'm letting the flock down, because the flock will be weak. And it's like you can't have a weak leader and a weak flock. It just doesn't work like that. You know what I'm saying? And so, like, I live a large majority of my life behind this wall that I've built. And, but I heard a guy say, and it stuck with me. He was talking about, like, whenever you get into the ministry, like not just being a Christian, but you're doing what we're doing. We're podcasting, or we're teaching, or we're preaching. He's like, whenever you do that, you sacrifice some things that you can never do again, that you can never say again, as long as you're in that position. Right. It's like you have to, you can't post the stuff that you used to post. You can't say the things that you used to say. You can't go the places you used to go. You can't, because you're going to be held to a higher standard. And even though we feel, and we've had a ton of conversation about this, even though we feel like it's unfair, that we're judged differently. But it's like, that's what God's word says. It says that if you are a leader, if you are a teacher, if you are a preacher, if you're a part of this ministry somehow, some way, that you're going to be held to a different standard, a higher accord. And for us, I feel like we forget that a lot. I feel like that in the ministry, that not just pastors and whatever, but just Christians in general. Like we give ourselves this excuse to sin called grace, and it's like, oh well, And I wrote this little quote down. I again, I know Nick just hates me because like I'm like I'm listening to I'm listening to stuff all the time. But I heard this today. It says you can't say that God knows your heart when your lifestyle says you don't know His. And I was like, oh, that is so like spot on, like just fire,
That's why
man.
Keenan stopped wearing the Tupac shirts.
Yeah, only on Saturday nights. But no, man, it's like if you're like, it's like we forget. Like we're like, oh man, well God knows my heart, and I've been wretched this week, and it's like, so I'm just going to come to church on Sunday, feel better about my wretched week, and go out and be wretched again Monday through Saturday, and it's like, man, it's like we don't truly understand. I feel like we're playing with fire, and we don't understand that. Like I feel like we're playing with fire, and we're using the excuse of, oh, I'm trying to get better, or I'm trying to be better, or I'm trying my best, or I'm trying this, or I'm trying that, and it's like
we're just selfish. I mean, I like from what I'm thinking, like we're so focused on how we feel. We're focused on how I feel, the freedom I feel, what I want to say, what I want to do, what and we neglect the people that are looking to us for guidance, for wisdom, for not necessarily, and this is a bad comparison, but not necessarily for an idol, but for somebody to look up to, somebody to aspire to be. Like we've talked before about those, those Christians that we've met before in our lives that were like, man, I want to be that free. I want to be like that. But we neglect that those people that there are people out there watching. We talk about it all the time. No matter where you are, who you are, people are watching you.
Oh yeah.
And as a Christian, if you're somebody who posts Bible verses, if you're somebody who goes to church, if you're somebody who, whatever else, there are going to be people who look at your feed and they're going to post something and they're going to say, I thought they were a Christian.
Yeah.
I can't believe they do that. I can't believe they did that.
That's why I take screenshots and send them to you.
Exactly. That's why you have group chats, right?
Yeah, and I'm like, oh, look at this. This is so funny.
But
unchristian is all get out. But gosh, funny. It's so funny.
But funny.
Yeah.
God forgive us. But again, I think that's where we as Christians are, again, and we talk about it so much, but we as Christians are just so selfish because we're so worried about how we feel, what we want. We want God to give to us. We want God to do for us. That we neglect that other people are watching us to know what to do, how to behave. They're looking to us. And I think there is that. You need to have that transparency. You need to have that authenticity. You need to have that vulnerability to say, I'm not perfect, because we don't want those people that are looking up to us to think we're perfect. And then when they fail to achieve that, they feel like failures.
Well, I think that's the reason why there's such an uproar in churches today. And across, I can't speak for the world, but I know at least here in the U.S., there's such an uproar when a pastor, it comes out that they've had an affair, or that
just take Michael Tate.
Yeah, I mean,
or from Newsboys, or you got the guy from what was that other band? The other day, somebody was accused of doing stuff to their brother. I don't remember. Need to Breathe.
No, it was Need to Breathe. Need to Breathe. Yeah, Need to Breathe. Yeah, it was them, and then so it's like
John Christ back when he got in trouble.
Exactly, but it's like we hold people up on a pedestal, but we tend to forget that it's like they're people. They're everyday people. And it's like they're already going to be judged differently because they've chosen to take on some of God's responsibility of spreading the gospel. So it's like, why in the world would we want to be a Saul at that point before he transformed into Paul? Right. Why would we want to be a Saul throwing stones at people? Why would we want? It's like, because I think it's just easy, Nick. It's just it's so, because just to take it away from spirituality for a second, away from Christianity, it's like, it's so easy to sit back and say, if I owned that business, or if I was the boss, or if I was this, or if I was in control, or if I was in charge, this is what I would do. It's so easy to do that. It's so easy to say that, but it's like, why weren't you then? Why weren't you in that position? Why weren't you? Oh, okay, because God didn't call you to be there. Okay,
you can't be trusted with the person in your pew next to you.
Exactly. My bad.
Yeah.
Or it's like, or you didn't have the initiative to own that business or to start that business. Or it's like, so, it's so easy to sit back and critique. It's so easy to sit back and judge. It's so easy to sit back and say, I would do things so differently. Or to cheer, whenever we think that somebody gets what we think they deserve, but like we said Sunday, it's like, there's none of us that deserves God's goodness, God's righteousness, God's forgiveness. There's none of
Mm-hmm.
us that deserves that. We all deserve a devil's hell. But because Jesus died upon a cross, we have, we have that mercy, we have that grace. And empathy, sympathy, God, I mean, there's
Mm-hmm.
so many words that you've thrown out a lot that literally we suck at.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we really do. And it's like, we really need to sit down and read, just read the Bible, and not the stuff, not the fluffiness, not the feel
Not the
good
Pinterest
verses.
verses, not the
Yeah,
Facebook
yeah, not the
verses.
stuff that you're going to hang in your bathroom,
Mm-hmm.
that you're never going to read because you're too busy doom scrolling on your phone. Not that stuff, man. Like, we need to read the Bible and truly challenge ourselves for what the Bible says.
Mm-hmm.
And we've lost that, that vulnerability, to be uncomfortable and to really challenge ourselves. And that's a lot of what I'm going to talk about tonight, in church, is that fear, fear itself. Fear is a good thing. We view fear as like, oh, we just need more faith. It's like, no, man, fear is really kind of like, fear is what activates faith. Fear can really push you
Mm-hmm.
towards
Fear
God.
grows faith.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
really the opposite of faith is comfort, because comfort will kill you,
Mm-hmm.
slowly. It's a slow death. But it's like we're even so I don't brainwashed, I guess, by like what we've heard, what we've saw, and we're just lazy. We're spiritually lethargic, where we
Mm-hmm.
don't want to read the Bible to say, let me grow my own faith, or let me find my own path, or let me believe my own way. We find something that's good, that's hot, that's trendy, that's flashy,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, oh, let me stay with that.
Right.
Let me stay with that. And yeah,
That's
just
why
to
we got pastors with more followers than actors.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Well, just to kind of plug in, I know we've said their name a lot. We're like, why aren't we bigger than Girls Gone Bible? But
Yeah,
you
my
know,
phone's been giving girls on Bible tips all night now.
but I heard, I seen a little clip with them and Philip Anthony Mitchell, who's just taking the internet by storm, right now. But one of the girls was talking about being out west and talking about being in churches out west, and how there's no lack of church, there's no lack of churches. I mean, there's churches
Mm-hmm.
everywhere, but she was saying there's a lack of spirit filled churches,
Yeah.
and there's churches that cater to people and
Mm-hmm.
cater to an audience. And she said, I realized that my life was going nowhere because I was going and sitting down, I was listening to TED Talks, I was listening to, Jesus is your biggest cheerleader, he loves you, he wants you to succeed, he wants you to be blessed. I was listening to those things, and she said, really, I was missing the righteousness. I was missing the holiness. I was missing the holding myself to a better standard, not holding other people, but holding myself to a
Mm-hmm.
better standard. Because if I'm holding myself to a better standard, then the people around me are going to change no
Mm-hmm.
matter what. And sometimes it's not those people changing, it's that people will physically change. Like, people will go out of your life because you're holding yourself to a different standard. It's not about changing people. Sometimes the people have to change,
Mm-hmm.
around you in order, and that'll happen when you hold yourself to a higher standard.
Yeah, I mean, and just all the things we've talked about, it's no wonder that the world is on fire. I mean, it really isn't. I mean,
Yeah.
as Christians, we're supposed to bring peace into
Yeah.
the situation.
Well, you've got eight different billion people in
Mm-hmm.
this planet, or on this planet right now, that basically think they're right.
Mm-hmm.
Every person thinks they're right. It's not like people wake up in the morning, Nick, and go, I'm wrong. This whole day today, I'm wrong. I'm going to take the blame for everything. I'm wrong. Morgan Wallen, I guess I'm the problem. And it's like nobody,
Taylor Swift. It's me.
yeah,
I'm the problem.
yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah.
it's like nobody wakes up feeling that way. Everybody wakes up with this conviction of, I'm right, and I'm going to show you I'm right. And it's like, if that's the case, man, it's like, if everybody's right and nobody's wrong, where's
Right.
Christianity fall in that?
Yeah, we just got to be more focused on the people around us. While like what, and this is crazy because we always talk a lot about don't be worried about what people say about you, don't be worried about what people think about you. And I
Mhm.
think to an extent that's true.
Mhm.
But again, as Christians, we are held to a higher standard. People are looking up to us. And we have got to be careful. I think whether it's about the ICE raids here in America, whether it's about the conflict over with Iran and Israel, or Ukraine and Russia, or
Right.
whoever else is, in a crapping match with each other, whoever it is.
Yeah.
But like we've got to be more careful with how we are presenting Jesus in these situations.
Well, I think for us, it's like we have to stay. I mean, this is just me in general, and you can disagree, agree, whatever. But we have to stay away from political issues.
Mhm.
As Christians, as
Mhm.
Christians, it's like, oh, we need our voice to be heard. Well, our voice to be heard about what?
Right.
What
Because I mean, no
exactly?
matter what side of the political spectrum you take, you're going to push people away on the other side,
Hmm.
and that's what gets so convoluted, so sticky, so gross. Because you have
Right.
Christians that are on one side, and I mean, like I said, we talked about it many different times here in America. You got Republicans and Democrats. You got a few people that call themselves liberals or libertarians.
Libertarians, yeah.
All those sorts of things, but ultimately at the end of the day, if I say I'm a Christian as a Republican, I don't think you can be a Christian and be a Democrat. If I'm a Christian liberal or Democrat, I'm not going to think you can be a Christian and be a Republican. Sure. Because of you can throw different things out there: immigration, abortion, all these different hot topics on one side of the spectrum or the other. And
I've always said, how can you fight for abortion and say that it's a
say
sin,
yes to the death penalty,
and say yes to the death penalty? I've always said that.
But politically, Republicans are like, yes, let's kill them, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then Democrats are like, yes, let's kill them, but the babies. It's
exactly.
just like you have this. Both sides of the spectrum are fighting for the death of somebody else,
Exactly.
which again rolls all the way back into what we started this about, with Iran and Israel, or with the immigrants, and all these sorts of different things. Is you put an opinion out there, you have to be careful, because more times than not, that opinion is not going to be grace filled. That opinion is not going to be God led.
Oh, no.
And so you've got to be careful about what you're saying, what you're putting out there, what you're speaking into the world. Again, the power of life and death lies in the tongue.
Yeah.
You've got to be careful what you're putting out there. You've got to be careful the image you're representing, or you're presenting of Christ, right? You got to be careful, because you don't want to do the devil's work for him. You don't want to push people further away from God. At the end of the day, yes, people are going to hate us because they hated Jesus first. That's what it says in the Bible.
That's
it's true. It's 100% true.
Yep.
But again, you have to, are you doing the devil's work, or are you doing Jesus's work? Are you bringing people closer to God, or pushing people further away from God with what you're saying, what you're doing, what you're wearing, what you're posting, all of those sorts of
But I
things.
think even that too, like we have, like there's so many ways that you could chop that up and say, well, they're going to hate you because they first hated me. And it's like, so does that really say, like, if you claim to be a Christian, people are going to hate you because you say you're a Christian? You know what I'm saying? So it's like,
because they know politically what Christians stand for.
Right, exactly. So that's where I'm thinking, like, it's like, sometimes you don't even have to quote unquote live like Jesus, to be, you can just say you're a Christian, and people will be like, oh, I don't want to be around you.
It's like Christians are more known by their political affiliations than what the Bible says about them.
Oh, yeah, 1,000%.
Like if you say you're a Christian, I know you're against this. I know you're against that. I know you probably believe this. I know you probably believe that. But again, it's not, as Jesus says, I think about that verse, it says, they hated me first, but well, what did Jesus do? Jesus loved the, prostitute, the woman at the well, the person who was caught in the middle of adultery. Jesus loved those people. Jesus gave those people grace. You didn't see Jesus, stone them. Go ahead.
Well, it was the religious people. It was the religious folk who hated Jesus. Mm-hmm. It wasn't the sick. It wasn't the depressed. It wasn't the broken. It wasn't the sinful that hated Jesus. It was the people who were putting on this shell of an act that were like, that claimed to be holy, claimed to be religious,
which is the same badge of honor we're wearing as modern day Christians.
Right, exactly. Where it's like, and that's the reason why I think a lot of times where it's like the sinners out there, the people who come up and say, yeah, I am this, I am a sinner, I am like this, and it's like, and that's the reason why they have such a problem with the quote unquote Christians who are out there, throwing rocks at people, but yet behind closed doors are stumbling, fumbling, bumbling so bad that, it's like, hey man, why can't we just all understand that we're all on an even playing field? And, at the end of the day, it's like the blood of Jesus covers every sin. The blood of Jesus can forgive every sin. And it is available for every person, like regardless. It is available for every single person that has breath. And like, for us to understand that, it's like, my God, it's like, and again, that verse that talks about, the same judgment that we use upon people will be the same judgment that is put back upon us one day. Like we have to understand that it's like if we're going to hold people, if we're going to hold people to this accord, like you should have done this, you should have been here, you should have been this, you should have been this, you should have been this. Like if we're going to hold people to that accord, like we best make sure that we are ready for God to look at us one day and say, "Hey, look, like you should have done this, you should have been here, you should have done this," because it's like again, I don't think we understand the point of we're playing with fire. Like this is the difference between heaven and hell. This is the difference between eternal glory or eternal damnation. This is the difference between spending your eternity with Jesus or spending your eternity with the devil. This is the difference. And we have to be able to understand that and say, hey, look, like this is a lot more important than what we're saying. This is a lot more important than VBS. This is a lot more important than learning some songs. This is a lot more important than what's the air set on. This is a lot more important than somebody making a bad decision and sleeping with somebody one time. This is a lot more important than that. This is the difference of where you're going to spend your eternity. And
we don't have time to worry about the trivial things.
Well, I mean, here's the deal. It's like, if you sin one time and you step out of your marriage and you have an affair, if you have an affair but yet you decide to make it right with Jesus, who am I to go back and say, well, you slept with that person 12 years ago? That's not, if it's covered under the blood, it's covered under the blood, not to be brought up against you anymore. That's what the Bible says. So why am I bringing it up for? I'm the one with the problem now, not that person.
God's not bringing it up. The devil's bringing it up.
Well, the devil's bringing it up through you. Yeah. As a judgmental Christian at that point, So it's like
I'm about to bring some judgment against this guy mowing outside too.
Is he mowing?
Yeah, he's definitely.
I thought that was Julie just vacuuming. Like
she's been vacuuming this same spot for a long time. If that were the case.
Well, your kid hangs out over there, so I mean, there could be a mess. I'm just saying. But yeah, I mean, it's like so. I know. I mean, we're not going to fix the world. We get it. Like we understand that completely. But gosh, there's just so much for Christians to work on. There's so much for us to not even be worried about, and just say, God, let me open up my Bible and work on me. Let me work on let me work on me. Let me read my Bible. Let me go past a 21-day plan or something like that. Like, let me go past my daily Bible reading and really get into the Word, and see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what I think we should leave it with. It's just, again, as we say, people suck. You suck.
I suck. We all, yeah. I mean, that's
true. But we got to be better. We got to do better. We got to love better. We got to show grace better. We got to be merciful better. We got to post better. Got to comment better. We got to like better. Got to share better. Got to do all these sorts of things better. Yeah. In order to show the love that Jesus wants us to show and be the light that Jesus wants us to be. And so that's how we need to be. That's what we need to do. And I just think, despite what's going on in the world, remember at the end of the day, Jesus is still King.
Yep.
If you believe in Him, things are going to be all right. It doesn't matter what's going on the outside. Doesn't matter what's going on physically. Spiritually, God's got you taken care of. So just remember that, be encouraged by that, and be thankful.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So again, we thank you so much for hanging with us. Thank you for the 2 new states that decided to hop on board with us, and just continue to tell people about People Suck, Love Them Anyways, and we're just out here trying to help a few people get to heaven for sure. So we love you so much. We thank you so much, and until we see you again, be blessed.